Why is the US totally dropping the ball on its economic goals, man? Everyone, I just want to say hello to everyone and welcome them back to our channel. If this is your first visit, please make sure to click on the subscribe button and then the bell icon to be notified of any new posts we produce. This episode dwells extensively into a vitally important topic that impacts everyone, the work of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, popularly known as the Fed, is charged with a unique and some believe challenging task. They are responsible with the dual tasks of preserving price stability and building an economy that promotes equal access to work opportunities. Both of these duties are critical to their job. Some economists believe that this trade-off is irrational because, according to their logic, it is impossible to achieve full employment without concurrently increasing costs. On the other hand, many argue that it is essential for preserving the security and stability of the United States economy. This development strengthens the viewpoint of those at the Federal Reserve who prioritize employment issues alongside inflation. In any case, the United States population finds itself in a position of neutrality. It is difficult to convince the general population that the objective is to increase unemployment rates. Nobody desires to receive this information. At what point does the level of difficulty that must be inflicted on innocent people become unacceptable? The solution is not a moderate or mild quantity of suffering, but rather the absence of all suffering. Due to a conflict between the objectives of the dual mandate and the Federal Reserve's efforts to achieve a balance that is virtually impossible to achieve, a difficult situation has arisen. The dual mandate necessitates maximizing employment and preserving price stability. These are the mandate's two objectives. On the other hand, the Federal Reserve did not always serve a dual purpose. It was founded in the late 1970s when the federal government struggled to address the rising unemployment rate. Since the Federal Reserve Act of 1977 was enacted into law by Congress, the United States Central Bank has pursued this dual mandate. In doing so, the central bank has utilized its extensive and precise authority, such as the ability to modify interest rates. The Federal Reserve System has developed a strategy in order to respond effectively to recessions whenever they materialize. To jumpstart the economy, lending rates are lowered, and spending, investment, and consumption are all boosted. In contrast, when the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, borrowing money becomes more costly, resulting in a decline in both borrowing and spending. In contrast to the dual mandate of the Federal Reserve System in the United States, the missions of certain foreign central banks are more narrowly focused and focus primarily on inflation targeting. In the absence of a dual mandate, the central bank in these nations may be tempted to give excessive weight to the inflation mandate, in which case it may be willing to tolerate any level of unemployment in order to achieve its inflation target of 2%. This technique should not be pursued. However, finding a middle ground is of utmost importance. The Federal Reserve Bank of the United States, for instance, aims for an inflation rate of 2%, whereas the European Central Bank does not consider employment issues. Due to its singular mission, the European Central Bank pursues more stringent monetary policies and sets interest rates that are higher than what the Federal Reserve would likely do in a comparable circumstance. According to this theory, the monetary policy has no effect on total economic activity or employment levels, including the unemployment rate, but only on prices over the long term. The problem arises when individuals anticipate that the central bank will directly target unemployment, resulting in an accommodating monetary policy. Price stability is inextricably linked to the Federal Reserve's monetary policy, so the Fed is able to manipulate interest rates and predict the effects of these manipulations with a high degree of precision. On the other hand, the labor market does not operate precisely as one might anticipate. This unpredictability stems from the fact that the employment market is influenced by a wide range of circumstances beyond the Federal Reserve's control. The Open Market Committee of the Federal Reserve, also known as the FOMC, is comprised of 12 members drawn from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors and the presidents of the regional reserve banks. Prior to deciding whether or not to raise interest rates, they execute an in-depth analysis of financial and economic data. The voting process is prompted by the dual mandate's objectives. This type of decision-making requires discernment, especially in dangerous situations involving narrow escapes. In the present day, it is imperative that Congress provide the Federal Reserve with a clear mandate. The complex task of determining which of the two objectives, lower inflation or low unemployment rates, should take precedence falls on the 12 voting members of the committee. Achieving a healthy balance between supply and demand is the key to maintaining price stability. If you want to maximize employment, you should aim to increase demand to the point where it exceeds supply. However, there is a risk associated with pursuing an extremely low inflation objective, as this could potentially lead to a recession, which would result in the loss of many jobs. Some economists contend that the relatively low unemployment rate and low inflation that the United States has experienced in recent decades are evidence that the dual mandate has been effective in attaining its objectives. For instance, the Federal Reserve targets for an inflation rate of 2%, which has helped individuals and businesses maintain a stable economic outlook. People's inflation expectations have remained relatively stable as a result of the Federal Reserve's inflation target, which can be attributed to orthodox monetary policy. Due to this stability, significant inflationary increases have been largely contained. During the turbulent 1970s, on the other hand, inflation spiraled out of control as people anticipated even higher inflation, resulting in a self-reinforced cycle. This contributed to the overall escalation of economic instability. The effectiveness of the dual mandate is ultimately determined by a number of factors, the most significant of which are the current condition of the economy and broader economic and political trends. However, it often appears that the Federal Reserve can only fight on one front, and there is an inherent conflict in attempting to regulate pricing and maximize employment simultaneously. This conflict can be attributed to the Federal Reserve's attempt to do both simultaneously. Some financial specialists believe that the Federal Reserve should return to having only one mandate. The current state of monetary policy, which incorporates Federal Reserve policy, places it at a crossroad. Restoring the reforms implemented in the late 1970s and reverting to a single mandate will result in greater economic stability in the long term. In my opinion, it would be preferable if the Federal Reserve focused solely on maintaining price stability. In accordance with the primary functions of monetary policy, this would instill confidence in the populace, ensuring that their ability to make purchases and retain value is maintained. The international community would almost surely respond more favorably to this position. On the other hand, it is highly unlikely that such a transformation will occur. One of the reasons why some industry professionals advocate for the Federal Reserve to prioritize prices over other issues is the inherent difficulty in measuring and determining maximal sustainable employment. Unlike the inflation objective, which has a distinct numerical benchmark of 2%, it is more challenging to establish a quantitative metric for maximum employment. In addition, if the Federal Reserve places an excessive emphasis on employment growth, it may be compelled to maintain unusually low interest rates for extended periods of time. This could potentially contribute to long-term inflationary pressures. There is still a tendency for central banks to be somewhat biased towards inflationary policies. As a 2% inflation target indicates, detractors question the justification for consistently increasing the cost of living for regular people. They argue that aiming for an increase in the cost of living is irrational because it would be counterproductive. Moreover, because the Fed is so focused on maintaining price stability, it is possible that it does not completely assess the impact that rising prices have on individuals with lower incomes. In conclusion, the effectiveness of the dual mandate depends on a variety of criteria and is the subject of ongoing debate among economists and legislators. It has been suggested that the mandate should be expanded to include addressing issues such as financial stability, income inequality, and climate change. However, for any changes to the mandate, Congress would need to pass legislation in spite of this. Federal Reserve continues to have some direction in its interpretation of the law and its approach to policy implementation. Given that the current policy alternates between reactive responses and proactive decision-making, it may be time to reconsider the use of a single mandate approach. Increasing an economy's real wealth ultimately depends on innovation, increased productivity, and efficiency-enhancing innovations. These developments make it possible to increase output while keeping inputs constant. If you want to learn more about the world of finance and how it affects our lives, this video is for you, whether you are an economist, a policy wonk, or just someone who wants to understand more about the world of money. Grab a coffee, take a seat, and settle in as I guide you through the complexities of the dual mandate of the Federal Reserve. In addition, remember that if you enjoy this video, you should demonstrate your appreciation by clicking the like button, sharing it with your friends, and letting us know your thoughts in the section below. Your contribution is necessary for the success of our content.